All right, everybody. Thanks a lot for your time. Thanks a lot, Jack, for coming in and sharing some of your experience. We're very excited to have you. Well, if people know, we already recorded a podcast. It wasn't about knowledge management. It was about e-signature. So I really recommend it to you to follow that up. I'm going to paste the link on the website where we are going to put the recording of this session. And Jack, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
So, Jack, I know that some people are very excited about knowledge management, but before we start jumping in with some of the questions, can you give us a little introduction on you, on your background? What are you doing right now on iManage?
Sure. Yeah, so I started my career after law school at Freshfields, which is a large international law firm. I was a restructuring and insolvency lawyer there, so I had my fair share of companies that were running out of money and did my best to save them. I always had an interest in technology, so I moved into the legal tech and innovation team at Freshfields. And I've been involved in a number of initiatives there, like around e-signatures, as Pepe said already, and transaction management and knowledge management. And I decided to make the jump to a legal tech vendor about 18 months ago. So I work at iManage. My role at iManage is legal practice lead, which means that I effectively advise customers of iManage solutions on strategic considerations, on data considerations, and most importantly, how they can instigate change in their organizations and get all of the excellent tools that they're buying actually used by people, which can be a huge challenge. So that's my background and that's what my role is now. And I have a particular focus on knowledge management at the moment.
Right, and that's our topic for today. And so, Jack, let's start by what prompted your interest in knowledge management. I mean, of course, we all know that lawyers, it's very rare when we have to work in a document from scratch, right? So we all have some database, maybe a Dropbox, maybe in some other cloud, but they're not that useful if you have it well classified, right? So how did that interest on knowledge management came to you?
I think that over the last 5 years, there's been a huge amount of interest in legal technology. And I think people have got very excited about things like artificial intelligence and blockchain and cloud and all this stuff, when actually legal technology has existed for decades, mostly in the knowledge management space. Things like practical law, LexisNexis, all of these things have existed for ages. I think they're legal technology. People don't get excited about them, but lawyers can't operate without them. Because if you think about what a lawyer actually does, it's advise people. And in order to advise people, that depends very heavily on knowledge. And the exciting thing I think about knowledge management is that I actually think that it's not too far away from data science. And it's all about capturing insights and experiences, sharing those with people in a way that helps them do their work. I think with the advent of new technology tools like transaction management solutions, I think these things present opportunities to capture more knowledge than has ever been captured before in a far more structured way that can make things more usable for people and help information sharing. So I'm sure we'll touch upon a lot of those, but I think it's a really exciting area that's kind of got a bit lost in some of the hype, and it's absolutely fundamental to what lawyers do.
Right. And there's something that I was thinking about actually when I was outlining some of the description for this webinar, because I think there's no correct translation or term in Spanish for knowledge management. I've seen some big firms here in Mexico and in Latin America that they have like the knowledge manager. Yeah, right. Like knowledge manager, but that's it. They use like an English term, right? So I don't know if there's or people right now that is joining us if they have like a different name, but can you give us a definition about what is knowledge management for somebody that has has never heard about it before?
Yeah, sure. So it's everywhere. If you are, like, you've already given one example. If I'm a lawyer drafting a contract, I'm not going to start from scratch. I'm going to start from a template. The process of creating that template at the start of its life, saving it somewhere, making it accessible to people. That's knowledge management. When that template turns into a contract and when the contract is signed, the guidance notes that you're issuing your lawyers on how to get documents signed in a way that's compliant with the law, the cases and legislation they have to read, all of those materials to make sure the lawyers are getting that document signed, that's knowledge management too. And once the document is signed, maybe it contains some really useful provisions that you could learn from the next time. Maybe we were negotiating a contract with somebody in the oil and gas industry, and they insisted on a particular clause being included in the contract because of the nature of the industry. How are we going to make that usable the next time somebody does that type of contract? Well, for the person that was working on that particular contract, they'll just look through their emails. But what about their colleague next door? How do you get them finding that information and sharing information between people and between teams? That's all knowledge management. So anything that helps inform the way lawyers advise their clients and inform the judgment they take and the predictions they make in the course of their legal advice, that is knowledge management. And everyone does it. Like lawyers, when they're emailing useful stuff around their team, that's knowledge management. Knowledge lawyers or professional support lawyers, as they're called in some places, who will create templates and create guides, that's knowledge management. And really it's the role of everybody in a law firm to do it. And there are all sorts of very interesting cultural challenges around how you go about doing it. But if I was to give you a definition, it's basically any materials that lawyers rely upon during the course of their work, that's knowledge. And the process of getting that to people and collecting it is knowledge management.
Right. And of course, I mean, there's a lot of things there that we can start working on right now. Like, it's not only have a database of information, right? Because you only want to have it at hand whenever you want to use it. Like that example that you just gave me, right? Just think about huge oil company that they have contracts in Mexico, in the UK, Russia, I don't know, Venezuela, you know, in the Middle East or whatever. And if you can have like a clause library, right,
Yeah.
where you can have applicable law. So instead of, you drafted, like the wording of a clause that you remember for a customer, but if you have to spend hours looking for that text, I mean, that maybe you have a database in place, right? But if you don't have it well classified, it's going to be still difficult to look for that piece of information. And not only contracts, even legal opinions, or even emails, right?
Yeah.
Like the newsletters. You want to use maybe pieces of that content just to reshare it, because maybe you have more than one customer that might be interested in that. So Jack, how has technology changed knowledge management? And I know we touched a little bit on artificial intelligence, but let's take a step back before going into the shiny technology, right? Like any recommendations on how people should start thinking about knowledge management?
I'll say something very controversial here, which is that the starting point for knowledge management is never technology. Because knowledge management is useless without the content. And when I say the word content, what I mean are the materials people are relying upon. So things like past contracts, clauses, guides, precedents, whatever you want to call them, research materials, all that stuff is content. And if you don't have any content, then your technology that you're using to implement your knowledge management solution is going to be completely worthless. Too often, I see people have this expectation that they can buy a knowledge management solution and somehow it's going to magic a load of content out of thin air. Like one of my colleagues that I manage recently said in an article that AI is at least 10 years away from being able to write content itself. If you're talking about AI, really the way that you should be thinking about AI is that it does predictions for you. So I'd actually go further. I actually don't think AI is ever going to write content for anything. I do think there's a role for AI to classify content and predict how content should be organized. But the starting point, to answer your question, is to focus on your content and how you're going to organize your content. And the thing you've always got to bear in mind is that the thing that you're fighting against, if you want to deploy a knowledge management solution, the thing your competitor product in your firm is essentially people emailing their colleagues to ask for the knowledge. So if I've got if I'm doing a contract with a company based in Costa Rica and I want a standard governing law clause for a Costa Rica contract, what I would have done when I was practicing, because at my firm there was no knowledge management solution in place, I emailed the team. I said, hello, everybody, I'm working on a Costa Rica contract. Has anybody got anything useful for me? So you have to make sure you're producing enough content, collecting enough content, organizing it properly, that you can produce a better outcome for people than they would get just by emailing people. And that's one of the main challenges with knowledge management.
Right. And I think that a lot of people think about artificial intelligence like the IBM Watson, right? Like somebody that if you ask, hey, Watson, I will need this. I'm in the middle of an M&A deal and I need this contract and this contract. It doesn't work like that right now. Especially, I think we are still years for that to artificial intelligence to become as intelligent as possible. But right now, maybe, I mean, artificial intelligence can be useful right now for advanced searching, right? Maybe if you have, especially if you have documents in place and you have all the data classified by, I don't know, special keywords, right? Inside of their contracts, right? If you're looking for amounts, jurisdiction, governing law, like special terms that you think is going to be useful, then it might be interesting to use that piece of technology. But it's a big mistake to jump straight to the technology before having all these processes right in place, like people structure the information or the files that they have been working on.
Well, I'll give you, I mean, I would say that like a lot of this depends on the data that's being plugged into, which what I was saying earlier, if we take an example like Google, believe it or not, has a vast amount of structured data that plug into it. Let me give you an example. If I wanted to find out how much a Tesla would cost me to buy, if I type in how much does a Tesla Model 3 cost into Google, it would likely give me a result that takes into account a number of factors like my location, for example. It would take into account, because I don't want to see how much a Tesla Model 3 costs in Mexico. I don't care how much it costs in the USA. But what it's doing is it's matching a piece of metadata that I come from the UK with metadata on the results, i.e. this is a result from a UK company. And it's putting two together and it's saying, okay, Jack's from the UK, let's prioritize results from the UK and let's show him the price of a Tesla Model 3 in the UK because that's likely what he's looking for. Search is a really interesting topic to get into. We can discuss this if you want. Tends not to be the most practical thing, but it's very, very interesting nonetheless, is that what you have to do when you're doing a search for knowledge materials is the system has to be able to detect what people are actually looking for based on what they type in a search box. So if I'm typing like quite a common one is share, if I type in share purchase agreement, the guy typing in share purchase agreement probably wants a template of a share purchase agreement. So prioritize templates and probably prioritize anything with the phrase SPA in it as well, because SPA is an abbreviation for share purchase agreement. None of that is driven by AI. That is just labeling your content properly. So this is a share purchase agreement. Also display it if someone types in SPA. That's just well labeled data and forming synonym lists and ontologies and metadata classifications and things like that. There's no AI in that whatsoever. And what we're doing, I manage for, because we do have a knowledge solution that we sell to people, is we work really, really closely on that kind of stuff. Like, how can I derive what the intent of a search is based on the words somebody types into a search box? And then how do I match that intent up with content? And it's exactly the same thing as what I was saying about the Tesla example. It's matching what my intent is, i.e. my intent is to get a price in the UK, and is matching those with the results, but it relies on the content plugged into the system to be labeled and classified properly, which is a really, really important part of knowledge management.
Right. And you know, there's some people here that works either law firms, big four companies, or Fortune 1000 companies. I think knowledge management can be useful to all of them, right? So let's think about there's somebody, or there's a law firm or an in-house team that is already they already have iManage in place, right?
Yeah.
So what in maybe most of the team is not using it well. Like, how would you recommend, like, take that first step into building that kind of standardized, or I don't know how to call it, right? So so that people start labeling those documents. How do you think will be like a good start? Maybe with contracts, or maybe with other documents? Or what are like the first recommendations that you do with your customers?
Okay. It's a 3-step process that I always outline.
Okay.
The first step is common to any legal tech initiative you're ever going to do. And that process is to focus on a particular area of your firm. For example, the corporate team, just choose them for sake of argument, and map out what work they do and where the roadblocks are. So, you know, corporate transaction, you know, maybe there's a stage of doing engagement letters. Maybe there's another one of structuring the transaction. Maybe there's another one of doing due diligence. Then maybe it's negotiating the documents and then signing. Talk to the lawyers, understand what the process is, and understand where the roadblocks are. That's the same with all legal tech initiatives. I don't believe it's best to buy the tool and then see where it lands. It's best to do this like forensically. Where are the road blockages? And it's the same with knowledge management. The question you're asking yourself is, when people are doing a corporate transaction, for the purposes of this example, what content is going to help them solve their pain points? So I choose an example. A common one that I hear is that when people come to negotiate their share purchase agreement, they don't know how to respond when the other side proposes something. They don't know whether to accept it or reject it. So let's say that's the problem you focused on. You've now got to move on to step 2, which is creating the content that helps solve that pain point that you've identified in the process stage. Content comes first, and you have to decide for knowledge management, do I need to create the content, or do I need to collect the content, or do I need to do both? In the example I just gave of, I want to help people negotiate a share purchase agreement, one possible thing that you might want to consider is collecting every single share purchase agreement that your team executes for every single corporate transaction, and then summarizing basically what was agreed in the document. So that's kind of a mixture of both. That's collecting the examples and then summarizing the examples so that people might end up with some sort of playbook. You could do one or the other. You could, if you don't, like, a lot of firms don't have knowledge management resource. They just, you know, they just want people to collect stuff, and that's fine. So you've got that step 2 is your content. And step 3 is how you're going to present that content to people. If you have a document management system like iManage, you can do this very, very easily. And the way you do this is by creating some sort of separate knowledge library. It can be a workspace, it can be a folder. And you can create various folders within that to categorize your content. So you might have one folder for share purchase agreement examples. You might have another folder for like due diligence guides. You might have another one for engagement letters to help you onboard matters. You might have another one for transaction structures so that people can see previous transaction structures you've done. But you can use iManage and most other document systems, frankly, on a very basic level, just to use folders to classify materials. And then when people come to want to access those things, they can really easily go into each folder and work out, you know, what content is going to be useful to them. That is Lots of people kind of say, look, that's really basic, but you'd be amazed at the number of people that don't take that first step. But it's absolutely crucial to establish what kind of content you need to create, collect that content or create it, and then organize it in a meaningful way. If you are starting to get into a place where you're starting to build up thousands upon thousands of documents, you should then consider moving away from a folder structure, because you often find yourself in a position where you want to put a document in, like, let's say you have a folder for the oil and gas industry and a folder for share purchase agreements. In which folder do you put a share purchase agreement that related to the oil and gas industry? Do you put it in the oil and gas folder, or do you put it in the share purchase agreement folder?
That's a tricky one.
And that's where you need to be thinking of having a proper knowledge management solution rather than using folders to classify and organize your content.
Right. So that was good for like the first steps on how to start with your knowledge management journey. And let's think about something more advanced, right? So let's think about what could be like the next steps once you have all of those basics in place.
Yeah. So what we're really talking about here is like curated content. That's an expression I'm going to use. And the reason I call it curated content is because if you had iManage DMS, if you're a reasonable sized firm, you may amass millions and millions and millions of documents in your DMS, but your knowledge stuff is going to form a small subset of that. And it's effectively, when you're doing a search, the haystack is smaller. So you're searching over a concentrated good material rather than your entire DMS, millions of documents. So if you want to take things further, you really need to change your curated content away from folders and towards some sort of metadata structure. And just to explain what I mean by that, if you right-click any document on your computer, you're going to see a number of properties like name, date, author, all that kind of stuff. If you put that document in a folder, it tells, people know what's likely to be in the folder by virtue of the name of the folder, but that's not really affecting the properties of the document. It's just belonging to a folder. If you want to take things more advanced step, you need to put more metadata on the documents. So you already have things like name of document, author, date, but you're going to want to think about putting other stuff on there. Like, for example, practice group, industry sector, type of document. Is it buyer friendly or is it seller friendly? What was interesting about this document? Some description of the document, that kind of thing. What was the law firm that acted on the other side? All of those things you want to think about adding to the document. And there's a few reasons why you want to do that. First of all, when people access the document, they can see at the click of a button that this particular law firm acted on the other side, or it was in this industry sector. They don't need to open the document to view that information. The second reason it's useful is because it provides you with more metadata to target searches properly. So remember that Tesla Model 3 search example I gave you?
Right.
That was only possible because the search results had location as their metadata. Same principle. If I typed in share purchase oil and gas, if I've got share purchase agreements document classification, I've got industry on it as well, those search results are going to come up the top. So yeah, I probably talked enough about the advanced stuff. So I don't want to get too much in a hole, but really the core of it is moving away from folder structures and into proper document properties and metadata.
Right. And so, Jack, now I want to bring your seller side, right? Because maybe we have all of these basics and theories on what you can do, right? But of course, there's a price for these pieces of technology. Like how, well, first question, is there like a different benefit from a law firm than from an in-house team, like to use iManage? And the second one, how can they calculate the return of investment into using these pieces of technology?
Yeah, really good questions. They're questions you should ask at the outset of this whole thing. And they are broadly the same use cases, but they are different in what they're trying to achieve. So whereas a law firm, it's about how can I get people doing a particular legal process in the best possible way, in accordance with best practice? Or how can I view examples of this so I can learn from what other people have done in the past? For in-house teams, they have a different set of incentives, clearly, because a lot of in-house teams, that they need to be making cost savings. They need to respond to the business quicker. So for them, a key part is also reducing spend on external counsel. That's one example. I hear a lot that this is a key use case for in-house teams who, when they receive a memo from external counsel, they want to reuse that memo in the future so that people aren't asking external counsel the same question twice. They will categorize a memo and say this was from Freshfields, it was about this legal topic, and that helps people find it in the future. So they're the same broad thing, but slightly different outcomes that they want out of the whole thing.
Right. And of course, especially right now, and I would say during the pandemic, legal teams and corporate legal teams faced reduction on their budget, right? And everybody know that's a lot of their budget, of course, is for wages or salaries for their teams. But they're very restricted and limited, right? Because maybe for the company, I think this is not okay, but a lot of the times they only think about the legal team as an expense, right? Because they're not part of the commercial part of the company. It's not bringing cash, right? So you have to be like, they're the owners and protectors of those annual budgets, and especially when they're working with the big law firms that they're billing and with that hourly rate, they cannot just spend more money than their actual budget. So I think that this will be like a really good way on how they can structure the information that they already paid for.
Yeah.
Right. So
absolutely.
in the future, that in case that they have a contract or maybe a corporate deed or whatever, that they can reuse some of the information or product that was already delivered by an external law firm with that kind of expertise. I think that would be like a good way on how they can see some of the reduction on their expenses.
Completely. And the other example I've seen, which is an extension of that, is that if we're in-house, allowing business teams to self-serve legal requests is quite a popular theme as well. Like if the business is coming up with the same question 5 or 6 times a month to the legal team, a lot of people are using knowledge management as a way of producing FAQ documents and things like that for the business team, so they can answer it themselves without necessarily needing legal sign-off. So yeah, you're dead right. The incentives are kind of polar opposite, and that's why the outcomes people want from this stuff slightly differ.
Right. So guys, we didn't receive any question on the chat, so we are going to start our Q&A session. So if you have a question, just feel free to unmute and we have a couple of minutes. So take advantage of having Jack here. So if you have any question or something, maybe you can bring some use case on your company. Of course, we care about confidentiality matters, but if you have a use case that Jack can be helpful on this, so I really advise you to take advantage of this some couple of minutes that we have left here on the session. So anybody has any question? No.
If no one does, feel free to reach out to me afterwards. I'm more than happy to sort of help out with stuff.
Perfect. So I'm going to just share again your LinkedIn, right, to everybody. We're going to also put it on the website. So anybody that wants to follow up Jack on knowledge management, and of course e-signature, that's another topic that Jack is very excited about. And please follow him. And well, Jack, maybe email. Do you have an email that they can reach you out?
Yeah, I'll put that in the chat as well, shall I, so that people have that.
Excellent. So everybody, if you don't have a question right now, I'm pretty sure that later on you're going to have a question on that. So Jack, I really appreciate your time. Everybody remember that we're going to publish this webinar shortly. So in case that you weren't able to see it in full, you can just see the recording. And Jack, it was an absolutely pleasure to have you here on the webinar.
Likewise, thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you a lot.
Thanks.